Hello and welcome to our video for the week. Again, this week we're going to be taking a look at chapters 16 and 17. So again, make sure that you do read both of those chapters for the week. Chapter 16, we're going to be taking a look at the scientific revolution that's going to be occurring in Europe at this time period. And what we really see is kind of a push away from church dogma. Meaning the church tells you this is where the earth came from, the earth is the center of the universe. But again, scientists are beginning to question that. It doesn't make sense from a scientific perspective. What is the actual answer? Now, a lot of what we see with the scientific revolution helps to come from the Renaissance art movement that we had just seen. Again, the Renaissance art movement was looking at things like light and shape and lines. And again, all of these things had to be studied in detail. A person had to understand angles and shapes and measurements. And this really spurs on the scientific revolution that is going to follow. Now, there are some major names we see here in this scientific revolution that are going to be very familiar to us. One of these names is Copernicus. Now, Copernicus is going to use math and data to make general observations of the universe. So again, he's using numbers to explain why things happen when they're going to happen. He also introduces the heliocentric concept, which is the idea that the Earth is the center, that the sun is the center of our universe and not the Earth. Again, that the Earth is one of the rotating planets, not everything rotating around us. All right, this is going to be built upon by Galileo. Now, Galileo is going to use telescopes. Again, a little bit more technology as the years pass. That's going to allow him to study the universe in a different fashion. Now, most people are a little more comfortable with what Galileo is doing because it is genuine observation, right? You can stand in front of the telescope, you can see things, whereas Copernicus is using math, right? It's kind of hypothetical. There are numbers. It makes sense if you understand the math. Again, Galileo's physically pointing things out to you. But again, the more that Galileo discovers, the more that he kind of questions where the Earth lies in this universe, the more upset the Catholic Church is going to be. And they do eventually kind of put him on trial and make him apologize for saying things that go against their specific teachings. Next major name we see is Isaac Newton. One of the things Newton comes up with is his three laws of motion. So again, it's probably very familiar to you from your science classes. But again, this helps to explain how planets can go around the sun. Again, if something is spinning and spinning and spinning, it should theoretically fly away at some point. But again, through these three laws and this explanation, it goes to explain how planets can rotate around the sun. There are some other areas that we're going to see science making improvements during this time, and one of those is with medicine. So we got this guy named Valerius. He dissected bodies to kind of show how the human body was working. Again, this is very controversial at the time, that when someone died, you left the body alone, you buried it, that way it was all there when it got to the other side. So again, the fact that someone in the scientific community is willing to dissect these bodies, learn from these bodies, kind of figure out how things operate, again, it's beneficial for all people performing medicine at this time. We also have an Englishman named Harvey who proved that the heart was the pumper of the blood. That's where the blood starts and ends. It circulates via the pumping of the heart. Now, this was fairly controversial because a lot of his experiments, or a lot of what he did to prove this, was actually done on living patients. He would just give them a certain level of anesthesia so they weren't necessarily feeling it. But again, the experiments are happening on people that are still alive. One of the other areas we see growth during this time is in the study of chemistry. Things like Boyle's Law, and some of the early work that we're going to see on studying atoms. Again, we don't physically have the ability to look at atoms yet, but scientists are starting to figure out that there is something very small that makes up everything on this earth. There's also Lavoisier, who starts naming the elements. So those of you that have had to learn the periodic table in your science classes, you can thank him for helping to name those elements. We also see the role of women changing during this time period as well, as more and more women get involved in the sciences. The first one we're going to take a look at is Margaret Cavendish. She's able to participate in the sciences mostly because of her high social standing. Again, she's a duchess. So again, she's well connected. She knows people. A little bit more respect is afforded to her than maybe kind of your average female at this time. And she argues that nature is uncontrollable, right? That it's one thing to study nature, it's one thing to understand nature, how things happen, when they're going to happen. But at the end of the day, man can't stop this, right? We can't alter this. That nature is bigger than us, and we need to be able to accept that. Another German we're going to take a look at is Maria Winkelmann. She's a German astronomer. Now, she was trained in astronomy before she gets married, but it doesn't hurt that she marries the most well-known German astronomer at this period of time. And again, as a couple, they work together and they really kind of advance the study of astronomy and really show what women are capable of. So again, even though we are getting more women involved in the sciences at this point in time, it's important to note that there are no women invited to the Royal Society of England, which is kind of the group of scientists that study things as a country, until the 20th century. So again, we are still several hundred years away from seeing women at least included in that kind of a group. One of the things we see is all these scientists from different countries are looking at different aspects of the world around us is the creation of the scientific method. Again, what is or is not an acceptable way to study science? If you're going to come to a conclusion, how do we know that that conclusion is accurate? Well, if everyone's following the scientific method, it doesn't matter where you are, what language you speak, what country you're working in, what you're studying. If we're all using the same standards as far as what is or is not acceptable, our conclusion should all be very similar, at least respectable. So again, we see the scientific method coming into play during this time period as well. So why is there this big push for science at this time period? Again, why are people getting more interested in learning things? One is the educated elite. They view this as a way to make money, right? If you can discover things, if you can find things, if you can solve problems, theoretically there's money to be made in doing this, right? So again, financially speaking, there is some incentive there. The masses find themselves very interested in science, mostly because they fancy themselves very rational thinkers. Again, they're reading books. They're having conversations at the local pub. Everyone wants to seem like they know what is going on. And again, it really spurs on this study of science. And lastly, you have the monarchies, the royals. Why are they allowing this to occur? Well, one of the reasons is because a lot of this scientific discovery involves military aspects, right? So whether it's ships, cannons, guns, anything of this nature, again, it's great if you can figure out how something works. Now use it to help us win the next war. And that's where the monarchies are kind of looking at this and approving of it and funding it in many ways. Now, as, again, we talked about with Galileo, as science increases, it's going to push into the realm of the Catholic Church. And obviously, the Catholic Church is not going to be a big fan of that. And their ultimate concern is that all of this science is going to lead people away from the church. All right, that again, if you don't need the Bible to explain things to you, if there is a scientific reason, then what are they there for? What is the Bible there for? What is the church there for? Now, there are many people, including the scientific community, who feel that they don't have to be separated. All right, that figuring out how the earth works doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. Doesn't mean God didn't create all this. It's just trying to figure out how he created all of it, how all of the stuff that he made works for us. So again, some people saw this as a separation, some people did not. All right, that takes us into chapter 17, where we see the Enlightenment movement. Now, the great thing about the Enlightenment movement is we're very familiar with this in America. Even if we haven't studied in history before, a lot of what's going to be talked about, a lot of the ideas are going to be really familiar to us as American citizens. So again, the scientific movement of the 17th century is going to lead into the Enlightenment movement of the 18th century. In short, we used science to explain how the world works, so let's use other ideas to make a better society, right? If we can understand how things work, if we can solve problems, we can live in a better world. And that's really the ultimate goal of the Enlightenment period. Now, some of this is going to be spurred on by the age of discovery, right? As people explore the world, as they write books, as they kind of explain all that there is to discover on this planet, it really gets people excited. Right? They want to meet new people. They want to see new places. And one of the things they find is that as they discover these kind of uncharted, especially in the Pacific, these islands, okay, they've never had interaction with Europeans in any way, shape, or form. What Europeans tend to find and write about, whether it's accurate or not, but what they write about is that these people are very unburdened. Right? They don't have this kind of structured religion in the same way that Europeans do. They don't have money. They don't have all of these things that theoretically should make our lives better. But in some way, they tend to make our lives worse. So again, that's really appealing to Europeans. How do these people live like this? How could we go back to living like this? All those different kinds of aspects to, again, create a better life. Right. Additionally, they'd hope that if they could find natural laws to explain the world around them, they could find laws that explain things like politics, the economy, justice, religion. Again, the scientific revolution of the 17th century solved some of the universe's biggest riddles, right? And if we can figure out a scientific way to explain the universe, why can't we figure out a way to explain justice or the economy or politics? Again, there should be a formula, there should be a method that exists that allows us to live in a better society from those perspectives. So that's part of what the Enlightenment period is trying to do. And again, there are some major names we see in this Enlightenment period. Montesquieu is one of the big French names that we are going to see. He's the first to write kind of about this separation of governmental powers. All right, that again, if a country has different groups controlling different aspects, again, getting away from that absolutism that we looked at in previous chapters, that again, it's going to be a safer society and it's going to allow more freedoms. Again, when those powers are separated. Voltaire is going to push for religious tolerance. That again, kind of having a nationwide religion doesn't make sense. That everyone should be able to practice or learn the religion that they want to. And again, just looking at those two basic ideas, we see this in our own American Revolution that will be coming during this 18th century. All right. So again, these ideas that America is founded on, the idea of separation of powers, providing for freedom, religious tolerance, all of those are going to be incorporated or rolled into what eventually becomes the American Revolution. Now, the role of women during the Enlightenment period is similar to other situations, right? Some are in, some are out, some are more open-minded, some are certainly not. Some males push for inclusion. People like Voltaire said, hey, women are just as intelligent as men. There are equals when it comes to mental capacity. Why wouldn't we listen to them? Why wouldn't we want to learn from them? So again, those are people that are pushing for inclusion. There's an English writer named Estelle that argued for more education for women, right? Again, if you're going to say women don't know as much as men, well, no kidding. You're not letting them into schools. You're not giving them that college education. You're not giving them the opportunity to learn things. So again, kind of pushing for those opportunities to exist. There's also a person named Wollstonecraft, who's kind of what we would consider the founder of feminism, really. That argued that asking women to obey men, that making women second-class citizens to men was the same as men being told that they should obey a monarch. Again, the Enlightenment period says there shouldn't be monarchies. There shouldn't be absolute power, that the power should lie in the hands of the people. So if you're saying as men, you shouldn't have to listen to a monarch, that you are that person's equal, then why would you turn around and tell women that they're not your equal, that they should be listening to you? And again, the idea that if humans are in fact created equal, that means women are equals as well, right? So again, these are just some of the ideas, the people, the events that we're going to take a look at here in chapter 16 and 17. So make sure you read both, please.